So thanks everyone for joining today. My name is Julian Sametinger. I'm a Senior Technical Product Manager at AWS. For those of you who are not familiar with AWS, it's the abbreviation for Amazon Web Services, which is our cloud computing arm. Within AWS, I'm part of a product team that works on products that allow people to make use of AWS more efficiently and learn how to use AWS better. I've been with Amazon all in all for a bit more than 3 years now, and in overall, would say that the topic that we are going to discuss today is something that I work with pretty much on a daily basis. So before we jump in, I'd like to ask you if you have heard of Amazon's working backward process before, and you can participate in this poll by going to slido.com and then you just pop in 500-709, and then I will see the results, or we should see the results live on the slide. So I can put it into the chat. Oh, there it goes. Yes, first one's in. Yes. I'd like to get like a 50% count. Okay, now the votes are coming in. No. So here are the key elements that we're going to discuss in this workshop today, and that make up the basic elements of the working backwards process. So you start with the customer. Yes, you were spot on there. Then you translate these findings into what we call a working backwards document. Then you review and discuss the working backwards document. And then you launch your application or your product or your service. Typically, for us, the fourth step today is not launching an actual service, but applying what we've learned and trying to give this process a try ourselves. If you listen to this very short take from Jeff Bezos on the working backwards process, let me just ask: has anyone of you ever worked on the process that he describes as actually being a lot of work, where you have teams building something and then going to the press or communications team and say, hey, write a press release for us. We have a product that needs to get shipped, but they didn't really take into account the customer needs and the customer pain points. And I have experienced that prior to joining Amazon myself. People spend a lot of work on creating a product that they think solves a customer pain point or solves a business need, without actually trying to understand what is really driving customers to make decisions in this particular segment or this particular industry. So we start with the customer, and you've probably already heard of our leadership principles. Our leadership principles at Amazon, they are publicly available, so you can look them up on the internet. They pretty much guide what we do at Amazon on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of companies, the leadership or their values and whatever they want to call it, they are there often as part of their HR or hiring strategy. But for quite a few companies in day-to-day business, those values then kind of fade into the background. And at Amazon, I've been part of a lot of meetings where we will actually debate specific business decisions from the perspective of our leadership principles. So whether we are prioritizing like customer obsession or bias for action, there are a lot of different leadership principles we have added two more recently. And working at Amazon really means like balancing those when you make business decisions. And one of them, and probably our most famous one, and the one that some of you already mentioned in the beginning of the workshop, is customer obsession. And that's really at the heart of all we do. And when I came to Amazon, I was really surprised at how much this matters and comes up in daily conversations and decision making. And when when Jeff Bezos was asked what makes Amazon different, he replied, that was like in shortly after Amazon had gone public, he replied by saying, "We are a needs-based company. We go through a lot of pain to understand our customers." An example of this is building the first Kindle, which you're probably familiar with. It's our ebook reader. And anyone in the world was able to download a book in under 60 seconds with this ebook reader. And at the time that we decided to build it, we had really little knowledge of building hardware products. And we had to learn all of that to actually deliver that new product to our customers. So why we do this is because we have learned that if you identify a customer need or pain point, your customers will want it. And either you or your company, in our case Amazon, will build it, or someone else will. So if it's an important customer need for you and for your company, then you might as well build it, even if it's not like something that is your core competency, or if it would involve a lot of work and effort. And for you are probably, most of you are probably working with customers in your day-to-day life. So I'm going to ask you a question that might seem easy, but if you think about it truly, it might be actually hard to answer. So who are your customers that you work with on a day-to-day base? We've went from like an abstract concept, enterprise customers, system integrators, ISVs. Now we're coming closer to who you're actually working with, which are human beings at the end of the day, right? We are all human beings. And that's often something that's easy to forget. Many customers they work with personas maybe, but they often think, oh yeah, we are selling to enterprise. So let's come up with an enterprise go-to-market strategy. Let's build a product that's great for enterprise. But what they often then don't look at is you are typically not selling to a business, really. You're still selling to people. It might just be that it's a organized group of people who all have different needs. And if you meet their needs, you're selling to the business that makes up the organization. But at the end of the day, needs are fundamental and personal. And that's really important to keep in mind. For all of us, even though we might be professionals, we bring our personal needs, whether that is that we are working towards maybe a promotion, or we have a big project that we want to launch. We all have some kind of a personal involvement in many of our day-to-day decisions. So needs are not features, but rather what a feature or solution will address. And customers often express needs as pain points, something that a person doesn't like or wish was better. So be aware that needs may be expressed as wants as well, or something desired or aspired to. And I guess like we already heard from you, Lubna, we have many different types of customers. And the next few slides, we kind of take a step back and reflect on a few different examples of different customers. If you look at this woman commuting on the bus, and you think about her as a customer, and again, it doesn't matter if you are in retail selling B2C, if you're in B2B, this woman might be one of your customers. She might be buying your solutions. She might be using the solutions. So if you try to really work backwards from the customer, you start with a person's context, and you ask yourself, how does their time, place, and situation affect their needs? And overall, with this process, yes, you might be selling, let's say you sell to enterprise customers and you have lots of different people that you engage with. But overall, you will eventually understand that many of them have certain similar requirements, and that their time, place, and situation affects them in maybe some similar ways. Let's have a look at another example. Someone who appears to be more technical, managing some kind of a facility, might be using some cloud services, maybe AWS or maybe Prashant's services at Microsoft. But again, if you ask yourself, who is he? What do you think he cares about? A lot of, when you think about the feature first, so let's say this is a utility company, you try to sell to a utility company by saying, oh, we're helping you do this and do that, then yeah, you might be addressing some business needs. But if you want to really like delight customers, you want to understand who the people are that are going to use your solution and going to buy your solution. And it's not only about like their context and time and their background, whether it's non-technical or technical. We also often sell to people in other cultures, like other countries. So we also need to think hard about a customer's culture, currency, language, and access. Access meaning accessibility for people who might not be able to consume content or products in the way that everyone else can. So in many countries, including like countries like India, Nigeria, or China, a mobile phone is the first and primary way that people connect to the internet. And the patterns and paradigms of like being of using a PC and being like a heavy web user or desktop user, like most of us are probably, they may not translate. And quite a few people in these countries rarely use emails because they have these super messaging services like WeChat or Line through which you can do everything that they use on their mobile. And customers might also have unreliable, slow, or expensive internet access. So when you work backwards from the customer, you also ask yourself, how do people around the world that I am selling to or that I want to offer a service to, how do they work? How do they, what's their context and cultural context? How do they work and how do they experience the services and products that are working on? Let's put this to another test briefly. Like to ask you if you're willing to share it. It's obviously all anonymous. With a similar poll like in the beginning, how often per month do you shop at Amazon? And again, you can go to slido.com and then enter 500 709 and you can participate in that poll. If you think about your experience there, and this is not to like promote Amazon or anything, this is not why I'm here today, but really to think about like customer needs. When you think about the end-to-end process of coming up with a need, my personal experience, we have run out of nappies, but the baby's actively pooping all of the time. All of those of you who have kids might relate. So we need nappies and we need them like soon. Being able to get nappies soon with a few clicks that I know how they work, I know what to expect, definitely for me personally has changed my life. And I've also experienced that with, for example, returning things where I have experienced that it's a real pain point when something breaks after you get it. And you're like, oh no, and now I have to get in touch with someone and I have to somehow send it back and then I have to haggle with them and figure out like how can we both find a way to be happy with maybe me getting a new product and all of these things. And that for me has been a real pain point in the past. And my first experience of Amazon was really, really one where I went like, oh wow, this is was a real pain most of my life, and now it's a breeze. I just say this is broken. Someone comes by, picks it up. I don't even have to show proof that it's broken. It's just being handled so easily. Most online retailers are primarily interested in selling something. But if you use the working backwards process properly, then regardless of whether your employer is Amazon or whether you are selling software or whether you're selling shoes or cosmetics, it really doesn't matter. You will think of your customer in a more holistic way. So it's not just about getting them to the point of sale, selling them something, and then hoping to turn them into repeat customers with some kind of a follow-up email and generic email when their birthday is coming up, and sending them the occasional email about a sales offer. It's really about understanding like what are these people trying to do. So let's say, for example, you are selling shoes and you have a offline like brick and mortar retail shop where you sell your shoes. Most of these shops are exclusively focused on attracting customers to come into the shop, setting them a shoe, and then hoping that they will come again. But for a lot of people, when you start thinking about it from the customer perspective and working backwards, you ask themselves, like, why do they come in there in the first place? Okay, they need shoes, but for what do they need the shoes? And then you can go into a lot of different scenarios, including, for example, that someone buys a pair of shoes in your shop, and then a few weeks later, they fall apart, and now they want to return them. And Jeanette, and for those of you, all of you probably on the call have already heard that I have a German accent. So Jeanette, I'm also from Germany originally, and I know how often in life I bought something, started using it, and then around like 2 weeks after of 2 weeks of usage, I often think, okay, this is working, and I don't need to keep my receipt. And then it breaks, and then I'm like, oh, do I still have the receipt? Because in Germany, you will not get anything refunded. Like, you have more or less zero chance of refund if you don't have the receipt. And you walk back into the store and you say, hey, I have a problem. 3 weeks ago, I bought this keyboard. I bought this or that. And they are like, oh yeah, sure, we can help you. Where's your receipt? And you go like, yeah, about that, I don't have that. And then all of a sudden, here's an opportunity for a business that's customer obsessed to figure out a way to help customers who lost their receipts to still get the experience that they need and to address their pain point. But for a lot of businesses, this is where it ends. They are happy to lose a customer just because they're not willing to investigate the pain points and the needs of a customer and to be really customer obsessed. So overall, some key points to keep in mind here when you ask yourself, who are your customers? Are a few things to be aware of. A is to introduce a feature, a product, a service just because it's cool. Everyone is in the software industry, everyone is using machine learning nowadays, and they throw it around, and every product gets a machine learning. But do you actually need it? Is it relevant for your customers? Ask yourself whether you are building because you think it's cool or your customers need it. Then features versus needs is the second key part to keep in mind when you assess whether you are working backwards from a customer or you're working backwards from business objectives or your own ideas about what a customer might need. And a lot of companies focus on selling a feature, and they say, we are offering the best hard drive in the market. It can do this, this, and that. Most of the buyers will not even know what half of the features mean. They just want to store the pictures of their wedding and their kids or whatever in a safe and secure manner. So always try to understand whether you, for your customer, features actually matter or the needs matter. Usually the needs matter more than the features, except if you're selling to a technical buyer and they specifically want a list of your features. And then, okay, thanks, Prashant. Bye. And the third point to keep in mind is your needs versus customer needs. So I think Jeanette and Lubna, you both mentioned examples of that. So in general, really, really helpful kind of decision-making mechanism to keep in mind is to assess, is this something that your team needs or is it something a customer needs? So closely related to features versus needs, but slightly different. And I found this cartoon, this Dilbert cartoon, a few weeks back, which I shared with the product team that I work on, and that was actually really, really helpful to illustrate this, where you have engineering manager or maybe a product manager who, as you can see, added a whole lot of features to the product, and that didn't quite work out. Can you still hear me? Sorry, my Zoom has...
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
Yeah.
If it's Zoom somehow breaks or stops, just shout out because I can't see the chat at the moment. Okay, so let's close this first chapter here. To summarize everything that we discussed in this first and like probably the most substantial part that we wanted to cover here in the beginning, is that great products and services come from deeply understanding customers. So if you spend some time and thought and empathy to understand your customers' needs, then the question is, what comes next? And at Amazon, the working backwards process starts properly in terms of the effort that you have to invest after having arrived at a clear need that you want to solve for a customer. And this is where you start to craft your working backwards document. And in this working backwards document, you start by addressing these 5 main questions first. And they might sound really, really obvious, but for a lot of people, just answering the first question properly and on a human level, not on a generic level, is already a real challenge. So who's your customer? What is the customer problem or opportunity? Is the most important customer benefit clear? How do you customer experience look like? So before we even start to actually build software or work on a product, we want to make sure that we think about these fundamental questions before we start building. If you have covered these 5 questions, you start to write the actual document. And what's part of a working backwards document at Amazon? First, the actual press release. So we're going to talk about that in a moment, but it's a 1-page press release that explains what we are launching and why, the benefits, and all of these things. Then frequent answers and questions part, where we already try to anticipate what the questions would be that customers might ask, but also our internal customers and stakeholders might ask. And so we already answered these questions in the FAQ, so that when other people review it, they can already see that we have thought about like different reactions, scenarios, potential risks, blockers, challenges, and they can read through that and understand what we are trying to achieve. And then on top of that, for most of what we build, we also add visuals. So that could be pictures from a whiteboarding session, that could be a back of the napkin drawing. You want to somehow visualize the customer experience and think about what it would look like. And by visualizing it, you make it, you have to really think a lot more about what the actual experience might look like. So let's say, for example, you create a new to-do app, and you think that you've really come up with the best concept of a to-do app, and it's the hottest thing since sliced bread. You might have based this idea just on like features that you wanted and things that you think are important for a to-do app. But if you have to visualize the actual customer experience end to end, you will most likely already identify a few points where you might not have spent enough time thinking about it, whether that's on the sign-up side or how you sync certain nodes or whatever that might be. Visualizing, writing it first, and then visualizing it typically covers most of the customer experience, so that you really address the most important blockers and challenges. One key element for writing, so once you've done the working backwards process, writing is a way how you capture everything that you have discovered when you were asking the working backwards questions, and when you went through the process of working backwards. Writing is the way to capture all of that. And that writing should be as simple as possible. So you would want to be able to give that press release to, or the working backwards document to your grandmother, to your niece who's in 7th grade, and they should be able to read that and understand most of it. So as professionals, particularly if we are working in technology, we often tend to start to fall into the language that we use in our day-to-day job, and we use a lot of abbreviations, industry-specific terms, and if we work backwards from the customer, typically we want to address the kind of the lowest common denominator in understanding across all customers. So we want to keep it simple, and we want to keep it engaging, and we don't want to overburden people with professional acronyms and language that might confuse them, so that they actually don't see the benefits. We want the benefits to stand out clearly and simply. And one way to achieve that is by focusing on using active voice. And this is probably one of the main writing tips that I would share with the audience here today, is that when you want to make writing convincing and when you want to make writing more engaging, check your writing for active voice or check it for passive voice, because that's what you want to avoid. And the easiest way to test if you are using passive voice is if you can add by zombies at the end of a sentence, then it's passive voice. So for example, if you look at the passive voice examples here, the video was streamed on Twitch. Can you add by zombies? Yes. The video was streamed on Twitch by zombies. That means it's passive voice. That means you should probably rephrase it and write about who streamed. So Sang streamed the video on Twitch. So active voice not only makes it more convincing in writing, it also generally, because you have to follow the same sentence structure where you have a subject first, you have to call out the owner. You have to call out if it's about the working backwards process, rather than saying that groceries can be picked up here and there. You want to say customers can now pick up groceries here and there. So when you write documents at work, generally a good piece of advice is to check for passive and active voice. And at Amazon, as part of this overall working backwards process and the writing process, we focus on that a lot. So now you've worked backwards from the customer. You have identified a customer need. You've asked the 5 customer questions that we covered earlier. You've created your working backwards document. So you have a press release, the additional FAQs, you have the visuals. So you're kind of ready to go on your end. And at Amazon, what happens next is one thing that makes this company kind of peculiar and unique again, is we review the working documents in a doc read meeting. So we have a readout of the document. Pre-COVID, that would mean that you get your leadership and stakeholders that need to be involved into a room, and you can't use PowerPoint. Some of you might be familiar with that fact, others might not. Within Amazon, we only use PowerPoint for things like project updates sometimes, or learning and enablement things. But if we work on business decisions, it's pretty much all in written and in long form. And the reason why we prefer like plain and simple writing on a document over bullet points and PowerPoint presentations is that when you present your idea on a PowerPoint presentation, a good presenter is able to hide some issues of the project or some things that they haven't addressed behind very effective presenting. And they might just put some high-level bullet points that sound great, but if you would double-click and double-click and double-click on these points, you would realize that the presenter doesn't even really know what they're talking about. And writing the whole thing out, we kind of ensure that people really think the whole thing through, and then they look at it from many different angles. So writing certainly forces clear thinking. And so to review these documents in a review meeting, you typically have a 90 minutes meeting where people come into the room, they have the documents on a table, no laptops, no phones. And then we spend the first 30 minutes reading, which can be quite excruciating if it's your document that's being read, because you've already read it, so you will probably not read it again. And you will be looking around the room, and you can read on people's faces, like when they react to your writing, and you might be thinking, oh, that person looks quite like grumpy, or that person doesn't look so convinced. And so that can be a bit tough if you are the author and your document is being reviewed. But basically, After the review, for 30 minutes, or 30 minutes we review the document, and then for 30 minutes we discuss the document itself, like aspects that might not have been clear, key questions, the structure, and all of these kind of things. And then we move on to the actual discussion around making a decision. And within Amazon, the culture of discussion and debate, healthy debate, constructive criticism is really strong. So people's feedback generally is very direct, to the point, not always wrapped in a lot of nice words. People usually say nice writing or something like that, but people really focus on the substance. They don't focus on you and style. They focus on the substance of the document, and that's the key aspect of the document review meeting. So we use it as a conversation starter to really achieve clarity and customer focus. And the idea is that if you bring several people into a room, not only do they all review the document, but then the ensuing discussion really often captures lightning in a bottle. And people build on top of each other's points, people ask questions, and a good document review meeting will have really lively debate and discussion. And that's something that is really a key part of the working backwards process. And the whole idea is that we, through those review meetings, we revise and make the idea better with each iteration. And it might happen that you at Amazon that you come into a working backwards document review meeting and leadership reads your document and they basically tell you to go back to your desk and spend quite a lot more time on some key elements of it and then come back. So rather than kind of driving for social cohesion and saying, yeah, this is kind of okay, let's add a little bit here and there, and then we might be able to run with this, we really try to keep a high bar in terms of what we consider to be a good PR FAQ or working backwards document to make sure that the quality of the writing eventually should translate into the quality of the service and the quality of the product. And that then ideally leads to, at one point, leadership saying, hey, we see the need that you have identified. Your working backwards document clearly lays out why we should do this. And we've discussed this in a lot of detail. Now go ahead, and Neil, this is kind of adding to your question. Now go ahead, build it. And in order to build it, you need to kind of build out a little bit more structure, more processes, and these processes are often captured in our narratives. And yeah, that is kind of end-to-end, in a nutshell, the working backwards process at Amazon. And I would say this much, this is like a super distilled and condensed version of the working backwards workshops that we typically do. So they are typically like 3 hours long. Today we've covered it in like 1 hour. And so what I want to say with this is, if you really go into the details of each of those steps, you can spend a lot of time on each of those basic points. You can spend, I've seen teams debate for a week who their customer is. And this is really like the idea of the working backwards process. Again, harking back to the short video by Jeff Bezos, is that yes, if done right, this process is a lot of work, but A, you're more likely to deliver a successful solution, and B, if done right, you actually save yourself a lot more work and stress post-launch. So I hope that was helpful for you today to get like a basic understanding of the process and how to do it.